1 analysis means.
Right. So Section 1 analysis basically says, Section 1 says, all of the rights and freedoms in the Charter are subject to reasonable limits. If the government can demonstrate that the infringement of the right is justified in a free and democratic society, then we're going to say, okay. And in order to show that it's justified, the government has to show that the problem that they were trying to solve was serious enough that it justified these measures, that they chose a proportional way of doing so, that it caused an infringement as little as possible under the circumstances, and so on. So, to Sam's point that charter rights and freedoms are not absolute, and of course they're not, Section 1 over time has shown to be a pretty large gate, wide enough for the government to drive a truck through sometimes.
Yeah, truck, yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Well, Brian Peckford, a former premier of Canada and one of the founders of the Charter, has vociferously objected to the government's use of Section 1, saying that he knows perfectly well, as a consequence of discussing the issue with the people who designed the Charter to begin with back in the 1980s, that none of them intended that Section 1 be used in a circumstance as trivial and uncertain as this one.
Right, but so to give the courts in this particular moment the benefit of the doubt, that's not actually what Section 1 says. I mean, if Section 1 had been intended to apply, only in the most extreme existential emergency situation, it could have worked that way if that is what it had said. But the way it is worded, it's at least possible to interpret Section 1 as giving, pretty loosey-goosey leeway for figuring out whether or not it's justified in any particular case.
Yeah, well, maybe Section 1 needs to be revisited in a really serious manner.
Listen, the whole Charter needs to be revisited. But unfortunately, we have created now such an onerous amending formula that becomes almost politically impossible to do. And even if it wasn't, I'm afraid that the political circumstances right now is such that if you opened up the Charter and the Constitution, you'd have a good constituency on the other side trying to make things worse from our point of view.
Right. So, okay, so let's talk about the courts momentarily. So, Bruce, I know you have some concerns about the politicization of courts in Canada, the politicization of the legal enterprise and the judiciary, and you're certainly not alone in that. Do you have any faith that this case can receive a fair trial?
Oh, I would like to think so, sure. Yes, listen, we have a lot of good judges in this country, a lot of very fine jurists with terrific legal minds. And yes, we have seen signs of what I would say ideological bias. For example, just to give you one small example, at his first press conference, when he became the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Chief Justice Wagner held a press conference. And he was asked by a reporter if he agreed that the Supreme Court of Canada was the most progressive in the world. And he agreed with the statement, and he said he was very proud of that fact. The most progressive court in the world in a progressive country, which is the way things ought to be. Now that is an expression of an ideological preference, and that's not what neutrality is supposed to mean inside a courtroom. But on the other hand, we have good judges who are able to carry out what I believe to be the proper judicial role. We saw it, for example, a short time ago when in her bail review, for the bail review of Tamara Leach, the Supreme Court Justice reviewed the facts and the law in a meticulous and careful and proper way and set her out on bail because that was the right decision.
Okay, so if a judge is acting properly, tell me if I've got this right. First of all, under the English common law system and its variants, let's say, that operate in Canada, a judge is supposed to take the current circumstances of polity and individuality and social change into account, but fundamentally remain within the framework evolved as a consequence of precedent and previous law. And so every decision is supposed to be tied back to a network of previous decisions, even though there has to be some transformation, let's say, on the edges. Is that a reasonable way of looking at it?
See, well, yes, exactly so. So one way it's been put is that and we have a common law system, right? So there's going to be some evolution over time, but the way they put it is it's supposed to be evolution and not revolution. You're not supposed to have the law being sort of handed down by the courts. The lawmaking role is that of the legislature, not the
right, not the courts. Yes,
right.
Well, and we've seen some decay of that in Canada as legislatures have abandoned their duty and left difficult decisions to a more activist judiciary, and this is a very bad thing. Okay.
Right.
So, but you think in this case at least, and perhaps in most court proceedings in Canada, that the judiciary is sufficiently intact so that a ruling on a case like this could be trusted?
Well, you see, it's impossible to tell because you don't know, who you're going to get or what's going to happen. So the track record during COVID hasn't been all that great because one thing that courts have demonstrated is not to every single judge, but as a pattern, is on an unwavering commitment to the government's COVID narrative. So far as to allow some judges to take judicial notice of, for example, the safety and benefit of the vaccine and the risk of the virus without any evidence. And so it's neither black or white one way or the other.
And okay. Sam, Carl, Sean, do you guys feel that you've been through this now for about 8 or 9 months? Do you feel that as you've observed the wheels of justice grinding slowly forward, that your sense of justice has been served? I know the outcome hasn't occurred yet, but how are you feeling about the process?
I think it did earlier on. It seems to have, this is just my opinion, of course, but it seems to have deteriorated a little bit in the last few months. But I don't know, just the attitude. I'll probably let Sam speak to this more, but like early on, the government are famous, just to get this out there, for throwing us curveballs. Right off the bat, they filed a motion out of the blue, and we wondered why they didn't want to cross-examine us, and then we found out a few days later why, is they filed a motion to have our affidavits struck. So, and I'll let Sam explain that a little bit better to you.
So these are difficult cases for obvious reasons, and I also think they're difficult cases in the social political climate that they happen in.